We all know how challenging it can be to keep one chameleon, but what about keeping multiple chameleons? Today I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of keeping multiple pet chameleons. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So I had my chameleon Neptune for almost 2 years before I got my second chameleon. I got Luna and Apollo, and now I have Venus and Comet. So at this point, I have lots of experience keeping multiple chameleons over the last, 5+ years at this point. So I want to talk through some of the pros and cons. First pro of having multiple chameleons, this sounds so silly, but you don't have to worry about hornworms getting too big. If you know, you know. Hornworms grow wicked fast. They'll just quadruple in size and eventually they can get too big for your chameleon, especially if you have a juvenile chameleon and they just get really big. And so it sometimes can be hard to find the balance of feeding your usual bugs with your treat bugs, and then your hornworms are getting too big and you only have one chameleon or one reptile that eats them. But if you have multiples, then you have to worry about it. And then in that case, I'm buying multiple packs of hornworms so everyone gets enough worms to enjoy them. So that's the other thing, that's another pro, is you get to buy your bugs in bulk. So when I just had Neptune, I would buy 100, 200 dubia roaches at a time, and that would last me for months. And then at one point, Neptune was like, I don't like dubia roaches. And if that sounds like your chameleon, please check out my video on tips and tricks for getting your chameleon to eat dubia roaches, because I've been through it. He did eventually eat them, but I was like, what am I gonna do with like 100 dubia roaches? And I only had Neptune at the time, and then my crested gecko, and like his bugs are smaller than Neptune's bugs. So I was like, what do I do? So I just held on to them, and like I said, he eventually ate them through those tips and tricks. But when you have multiple chameleons, then it's advantageous to buy your bugs online, because then you can get them in bulk. I am an affiliate with multiple bug companies at this point, so if you go to my website, neptunethechameleon.com, and toggle over to the bug page, you'll have some different options if you're interested in kind of checking out online. But that is a huge pro. It's way cheaper, more options, and ultimately you can buy in bulk and save some money. Another pro of having multiple chameleons is you usually end up having a lot of the supplies anyways. So what you could do is get like a 48-inch fixture and just put it on 2 enclosures. You probably already have lots of plants and branches. You can put those into a new enclosure. So I feel like once you set up one chameleon enclosure, it's not that hard to set up a second chameleon enclosure. But that does bring me into the con for multiple chameleons, is that they take up a lot of space. At this point, I have a whole reptile room, and this whole side of the room is dedicated to just my adult chameleons. The babies will be chilling on the other side. But that is a consideration with space. Most chameleon species, typically veiled panther and Jackson's chameleons, male or female, I recommend a 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 foot tall enclosure, plus raising them up off the ground. You're looking about 2 feet wide, 6 feet tall per enclosure. So that's quite a bit of space, especially when we look at other reptiles that don't necessarily need that much vertical space or width. Obviously very, very dependent on the species you keep. I do think that is kind of a pro of chameleons, is we're arboreal. I say we as if I'm like a chameleon, whatever, you know what I mean. They're long or tall, skinny enclosures versus if you have multiple beer dragons, for example, a species that has a horizontal enclosure, you have to have a lot of space that way. I guess you could stack up. Just like space in general, right? When you're dealing with multiple reptiles is a consideration. Another thing is that chameleons are solitary creatures, so each chameleon is going to need its own enclosure, and there needs to be a visual barrier. So you have to think through, how can I make sure that the chameleons can't see each other? I, for one, have Luna's enclosure, which is a hybrid, so it's got PVC sides, so that like naturally works as a visual barrier. I have custom backdrops on those. You can wrap those on the sides if you are interested in those. Those are from petbackdrops.com. Code Neptune10 does save you 10% off. I absolutely love those. You can also just cut a piece of PVC, a large piece of cardboard. You get a super cheap shower curtain. Like, you have tons of different options. You just want to make sure they can't see each other. That could be a cause of stress for them. Another pro of having multiple chameleons is that I think your experience and expertise just doubles, triples, quadruples as you bring on more and more chameleon species. With your first, you learn a lot, trust me, but then you learn a lot with that second chameleon. They're gonna have different personalities. If it's a different species, then you're gonna be learning how to take care for a different species and seeing those nuances. A male versus a female, but even same species, male, female, whatever, you will see personality differences. And I think that's so insightful because then you're just learning more as a chameleon keeper. I know my learning has doubled, tripled, quadrupled over the years as I've had more experience keeping multiple chameleon species. So I think that's the bulk of my pros. So some cons: more money, more expensive. Yes, you're buying your bugs in bulk, but you're still probably spending more on bugs than you would normally. You're having to replace UVB bulbs, plants, branches, the whole shebang on a regular basis. That's just more cost, not to mention the actual cost of the animal. Your electricity is probably going to go up. The water requirements are going to increase. So there's just more to it. Maintenance, I don't think, as someone who's gone from like 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 chameleons at a time, I don't see too much of a difference going like each incremental one. Like I'm still feeding them all. I will say a baby versus adult, there's a significant difference in maintenance because babies are just eating and pooping more often. But generally speaking, like yes, there is an increase. I would say I can comfortably keep like 5 chameleons, and I don't think that would be too much. I think if I went more than 5, then I'm like, okay, this is gonna be taking like a lot more of my time to do like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 chameleons. But I would say like for me personally, a lot of my stuff is automated. So like 1 to 5 chameleons seems pretty similar as far as like the time it takes for me to take care of them. I will say though, as you have more chameleons, things like going out of town or traveling can get a little more complicated. When you have just one, you could consider boarding them somewhere. You could have a friend come over and just like spray them down, whatever you need. When you have a whole room full of them, you're certainly not boarding all of them, of just like, come on everybody, like let's go. And like boarding is really only something I would recommend for like long term. Like you're gone for like 2 weeks, you're like out of country or something, a couple of days. I think you can automate everything and you have an adult, they'll be fine. But that's a whole nother topic we can get into, going on vacation with a pet chameleon. But I think just generally speaking can get a little more nuanced, a little more complicated as you have more reptiles or more chameleons in general, of just trying to find someone who's comfortable taking care of all of them. Speaking of comfort though, like what is this impact on your social life? Like I distinctly remember having Neptune and then getting Apollo and Luna, who I got at the same time. So I went 1 to 3 immediately. I was like, whoa. And I had Pluto. So I went from 2 to 4 reptiles. And I was like, whoa, 4 reptiles, that's almost 5, right? And so I was like, what is that going to do for like my dating life, my friendships, my family, my living situation, right? If you have like roommates or live with family members or, you know, what have you, like that's just, as you're increasing in numbers, something to think about. And like, I mean, in all honesty, your friends should be supportive, your family should be supportive, your significant other should be supportive. Like it shouldn't be a reason to not do. But I think just as humans, we just care. We care what other people think, and I think it's just important to be mindful of how that can like impact your lifestyle, right? And how you go about living your life and your priorities and who you want to spend your time with. One thing that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about with chameleon keeping is that they're hard to quarantine. The golden rule when you bring a new reptile into your home is to quarantine them. This is for the safety of the animal, to make sure that they're healthy and that there aren't any issues going on, but also for any other reptiles you have in your home, to protect them if that animal is sick or is having some health issue, that you're not passing that on to your other reptiles. But with chameleons, we can't put them in like a sterile like bin or something, or a sterile enclosure. Like we're typically working with screen enclosures, and we're typically having to put lots of plants and branches in there to some extent, right? So that can be really hard and a little nerve-wracking when you're bringing in another chameleon into your home. So just be mindful of where you're purchasing your chameleon from. Be sure to do a fecal test before you, or not, I mean, you have to bring them home, but like do a fecal test right away to make sure that they aren't carrying anything. And then of course, treat them immediately if need be, because when you're working with multiple reptiles and multiple chameleons, if one gets sick, there's a possibility that the other ones could get sick. So we just wanna make sure we get ahead of it. Kind of on that same note, when you have multiple chameleons, a con is the loss, right? Losing the pet, losing the animal is obviously a heavy blow. Losing one pet, one reptile, one chameleon, one family member is like hard enough as is, and now you have double that, triple that, quadrupled that. I had a really hard time when I lost Apollo a couple years ago of wanting to get another chameleon. Like I just had Neptune, Apollo, and Luna. I hadn't gotten Venus yet, and I was like really like had previously wanted to do that. But I was like, oh, so hard to like lose Apollo, having just lost Neptune. Like it'd be so easy to write off chameleons or pets in general out of fear of the feeling of loss, right? The heartache, the emptiness, like grief, really, right? It'd be so easy to be like, I just don't want to deal with that. And if that's your decision that you make, like so supportive of that and like whatever is best for you. My mentality though is like, you have to open yourself up to the joy and the love. And if you have this desire for another chameleon, or you have this desire to bring in new animals, like don't let the fear of losing them prevent you from experiencing the joy that you gain from taking care of them. And that's just the mentality that I've tried to maintain. But maybe be mindful of like how often you're getting them, right? Like maybe stagger them, wait till your first chameleon is a couple years old before you get your next one, if possible. Okay, I totally get it if that's not possible, but that's something that I try to be cognizant of like the age gap between my species, so then I can like, sounds so bad, but like hopefully spread out the loss so it's not all at the same time. But there you guys have it. Those are just some of my pros and cons of keeping multiple chameleons as compared to just one chameleon. But let me know your experiences, your thoughts. Would love to hear from you guys directly. As always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave any questions or comments down below. Feel free to subscribe so you don't post a new video. You can follow me and all my chameleons on social media at Neptune the Chameleon. Feel free to check out my website, neptunethechameleon.com. Otherwise, that is a wrap on this video. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.